Hello and welcome to Crunchy Code. In this series, I'll be teaching you how to code in C#. Today we'll cover variables, constants, and data types, and at the end we will create our very first program. Let's begin. C# is a high-level programming language. This means it is very English-like and can be understood by humans, as compared to low-level programming languages such as binary, which is a bunch of zeros and ones, which are very hard to understand and maintain your code. C# is also an object-oriented programming language. This is when objects are created from classes, and objects contain both data and code, and are used to simulate real-world objects such as a student or a car. And we'll cover this later on in the series. Variables. Variables are used to store data in your program or are placeholders. They are a means to store data within your program, and you can give them names. So you can take the user's input and store it as an age or store it as whatever the purpose is, and you can give it a meaningful name, such as int age. The int prefix would specify its data type, and the age part would specify its purpose. Variables are subject to change. Throughout your program, the value of a variable can change if it's up to the programmer, and this is in contrast to constants, which once declared and initialized cannot be changed when the code is running. Variables are used in the program to make code more readable. So instead of using values in calculations, you can store values and then use their names within calculations to help read your code better. Constants. Constants are very similar to variables in the way they are placeholders for data. But however, as mentioned earlier, they cannot be changed. So once you declare a variable, or once you declare a constant within your code, you can't change the value of it when the code is running. There are a wide variety of data types available. On the next slide, I will show you the different data types available in C# and the system resources they take. And depending on each data type, they take up different amount of memory resources. And this can help with efficiency, because if you use the correct data type, you'd use the correct amount of system resources, and this would reduce waste. The more system resources you take, the program would run much slower, as other programs, when running, would require the hardware resources, and it's being allocated and wasted if you don't use the correct data type. Here are the primitive data types found in C#. As you can see, on the left we have the names of the data types, and in the middle we have in the middle column we have the values or the range of them. You can see some are numeric whilst others are not. We have to the right hand side, which tells us how many system resources the data type takes. Earlier I have mentioned you can have data efficiency within your code when you use the correct data type. For example, we could store a user's age as a byte instead of an int, because a byte data type takes up 4 times less than int in terms of memory usage, and the byte's value is more sensible. So this is pretty much it for data types, and now we can move on to coding. But before we do that, I want to show you how to get set up and get your IDE, and then we can begin coding our very first program. Okay, now before we start coding, we're going to download an IDE from Visual Studio. So if you head up to Google Chrome and type in Visual Studio Community, just click on visualstudio.microsoft.com/downloads, and you should see this program you can download, Visual Studio 2017 Community. This version is free, so it's free for anyone you can use to create your own projects and code. So once you download it, go ahead and install it, and we can move on to coding. So once you open Visual Studio, you should be greeted by this page. Go ahead and click on Create New Project, and click on Visual C# if it's not selected already. What we want to do is search for console app.NET Framework. And what this will do is allow us to create a command line application. So just name it hello world. So once you named it, just go ahead and click on OK, and it should load. Just wait for it to load. So once it loaded, it will import all the statements, and it will add in the namespace and the class. What we need to focus on is what's inside this main method. Now copy what I do, and I'll explain everything in a minute. So we're going to type in console.write line, open bracket, close bracket, and inside here we're going to put 2 quotation marks or speech marks, and we're just going to write in hello world and end it with a semicolon. The next line, on the next line, we're going to write console dot read line. Essentially, what we've done is we're using the console object, and we're using the write line method of the console object. We want to send in the string hello world, and what it will do is it will write to the console the string hello world. It will write what's inside this. And the next line, what the next line does, it's another method of the console object. This just waits in for an input, and we'll use this later on in the course to assign values to variables or take an input. All this is doing right now is just waiting for the user to press enter. So let's go ahead and run this, and we should see the console pop up, and we should see the text hello world. Yep, here it is. So this is the very first program we created. It's a very simple program. It just displays hello world in the console. Well, Windows users might recognize this as the command line prompt, or CMD, but in C# we would call this the console. That's pretty much it for today's tutorial. Next we'll cover variables. We'll add in variables within our program, and we'll start implementing the things we learnt in the introduction, such as the data types and variables and constants. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you learned something new, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.